Hello and welcome to a new series of podcasts which look at rare conditions that you've probably never even heard of, let alone can pronounce. So I'm going to say from the outset that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a health worker, I'm certainly not a counsellor. And all we're aiming to do in this series really is hear from those who have experienced or are experiencing these sometimes life-changing or life-limiting diseases and conditions, which I think need a little bit more understanding and exposure. So just living with one of these conditions is often very confusing, lonely and isolating. Most doctors with my condition can't even pronounce it. And some have even Googled the condition whilst I've been sat there in their GP surgery. And that's not a criticism of them or indeed the medical profession. But again, this series is about shedding some light on some of these conditions. We're simply here to share some awareness. This first series is all about Chiari Malformation and syringomyelia. And again, if you want to know what they are, look them up on Google, look them up on the NHS website. The conditions are there. This series was really about talking to those living with the conditions and their experiences. So without further ado, let's talk to Pauline. So look, Pauline, a little bit later than advertised. Now, actually, to be honest with you, the listeners don't really care because they're just listening on demand. But we were due to meet half an hour ago and we couldn't because
my nephew was being interviewed live on television and he won the gold in the 7x7 Rubik's Cube in the European Championships in Spain 2 weeks ago, representing Ireland. So
I love that. I love that. Did you say Rubik's Cube?
Yeah.
As in the Rubik's Cube?
As in the Rubik's Cube, yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Okay, that is absolutely amazing. He was on radio. How did he do?
He was on television, actually. He was on the Irish TV programme this morning for about 5 minutes, but he wasn't too sure whether he was going on or not, so it was kind of a last-minute quick WhatsApp message on the family group, put him on now. So,
have you been following the Olympics? It's been amazing, hasn't it?
Yes, I have, but I'm kind of glad it's nearly over.
Okay, so with that in mind, let's crack on. So, Pauline, we intentionally haven't had too much of a conversation beforehand because I think for these podcasts, there's a tendency for you and me to have a really good chat beforehand and then get to the podcast and not talk about any of the stuff that matters because we've already talked it through. So, let's start right at the heart of it. Can I ask you about your condition?
I was diagnosed with Arnold Chiari Malformation in June 1997. And I had the decompression surgery in September 1997. And I'm one of the lucky ones. I still have symptoms, I still suffer, but it's manageable. And I've actually learned to live with it, you know. So sure. I'm really one of the lucky ones.
Sure, no, absolutely. And there's I have syringomyelia. And it's absolutely astonishing, the range of symptoms. Some people can live with it sort of almost kind of asymptomatic, and other people, of course, are severely debilitated by it. So 1997, let me take you back to that point when you were first diagnosed. What happened? How did it all come about?
Well, 3 years prior to that, I started with a pain in my left big toe. And it just developed from there. Pains in my legs, pains in my arms, very, very tired. Went to the doctor. I got restless leg syndrome. I had stress. I had quite an important job at that time, and they put it down to that. Then this went on for 3 years. All different kind of symptoms, terrible headaches. Then all of a sudden I wasn't able to grip a cup, or I wasn't able to hold plates or something. It was just weird. It was just really, really weird symptoms. And then I started getting these really stabbing, what I called ice pack headaches. I could be doing anything and then I just get a right belt, like somebody came behind me and just hit me in the back of the head. And then I got a little bit of incontinence when I was sneezing or when I was laughing. And it just developed to there that was one day I got up and I just couldn't stand.
So
And
3 years is a long time to live through those symptoms, and to see things, as you say, sort of go weird and think, oh my gosh, what's happening? What were you thinking? What were your fears? I mean, I guess you were seeing a GP at this point, but had you done your research? Obviously, at this point, you probably never even heard of Chiari malformation, right?
nope, even my GP never heard of it. And MRI scans were just in their infancy. And I had all sorts of tests before that. I had all x-rays and things like that. And eventually I sat in the doctor's surgery crying one day and I said, I just can't keep going on like that, the way I am. And he shrugged his shoulders, bearing in mind I'm giving my age away now, but I think I was about 38 at the time. I'm 66 now. And he shrugged his shoulders and he said, well, I don't know what's wrong with you. I've tried everything. I just, last resort, refer you to a neurologist, which he did do. And they took me in for 3 days into hospital, and I had all sorts of tests, wires on my head, and you name it. And they said they were looking for motor neurons disease, multiple sclerosis. They were looking neurologically. And I had an MRI scan, which was quite, as I said, in its infancy. And I went back for the results, and my husband said I'd come with you. And I said, no, I'll be grand, I'll be fine, I'll be all right, be no problem. I left a meeting to go. And when I got there, the doctor asked if I was on my own. I said I was. And he says, well, we've discovered you've got a very rare brain condition. And of course, straight away, I thought, oh my God, I've got a brain tumor. And he said, you've got a condition called Chiari Malformation, and we've never had one here in North Staffordshire before. And so I'm referring you to the neurosurgeon. And he described that the top of my brain, instead of it being like the top of my spinal cord, instead of it being round, it was at an angle. And my brain had dropped down and was pressing on it and was actually seeping out into the spinal cord. And that I'd need surgery for it. So
did you have the lots of people who have Chiari malformation have an associated condition, syringomyelia, which is a fluid cyst in the spinal cord. Did you have that?
No, thank God. I was extremely lucky, and I didn't go on to develop it, which was another rare thing. So that's, I was taken into hospital at the beginning of the September. Everything was ready. I got my anaesthetic, and then they came and said I had to be cancelled because they hadn't got an ITU bed, and I had to go home.
Happened to me. I mean, you psych yourself up for these operations, and they're big operations. I mean, these are these are potentially life-changing or life-limiting operations. The truth be told, and yeah, I got to Addenbrooke's and I went, sorry.
I know.
Really.
Can I just share a funny story that happened to me prior to the surgery? I was in a meeting in work with a supplier. I was a procurement manager, and we were discussing price increases or whatever else. And we were just sitting there chatting away and all that. And involuntarily, my leg moved and kicked him in the shin. And he said, and I went, oh, I'm ever so sorry about that. Because at the time I didn't make a big issue of it. And he says, what did you do that for? It's like an assault. And I said, no, I've got this condition whereby my muscles will just decide to do things that I don't know they're going to do. So there was little incidents like that kind of helped me get through. I still laugh about it now. The shock on the guy's face was unbelievable. I did manage to get a reduction though, which was good.
It is interesting. You remind me of many of my early conditions that just didn't make any sense. They didn't make any sense, and they were slightly comical when they weren't absolutely terrifying or just bewildering. I mean, I remember doubled up on the kitchen floor because I'd sneezed, and I got this fear of sneezing because every time I sneezed, I was absolutely doubled up in pain. It didn't make any sense. None of it made any sense. You go to the doctor and say, look, actually, every time I sneeze, I'm in chronic pain, like doubled up
And
on the
you
floor.
have to hold your head, don't you? You have to put your two hands very
Yeah,
tight. Even now,
yeah,
if I go to sneeze, I
yeah.
can. I'm very conscious. I hold my head. And the other thing that affected me pretty badly was, and even now I can, is post surgery. I came out with supersonic hearing, so I could hear the grass grow. So I avoid loud music and loud television, and I can't cope with screaming. I can't cope with a child screaming and things like that.
You've come out of surgery with a superpower, Pauline.
Yeah.
That's why you've come out with a superpower. So I mean, imagine. Okay, so I get it. The serious point is loud noises, very distressing, very disturbing. But actually, you can overhear so many conversations, right? I mean, you shouldn't. I hope you don't, but you must.
Yeah. Like my poor husband can't mutter under his breath now.
Absolutely. So I just want to take you back to Pauline. Lovely accent. Where were you born?
I was born in Dublin.
Raised in Dublin
I was
and moved over to Staffordshire. At what age?
28.
Okay. In those early 28 years, those formative years, was there anything that, I mean, I'm sure you've done this. We've all done it. We've all done that kind of historic post-mortem where we've looked back at our childhood, being in our teens and our early 20s and gone, were there signs? I can say categorically with me there were, and
Yep.
I just couldn't make sense of them. And my mum had multiple sclerosis. So there was always something in the back of my head that said, oh my gosh, it's been
Mhm.
passed on to the younger son. I'm not really sure I want to know, to be honest with you. But
Mm.
but what about yourself? Were there signs?
Oh God, yeah, I was known as Clumsy Pauline.
Right.
I would trip, I would drop, um, I would drop things, I would trip over things, I would break things, and I was just known as clumsy. So yeah, there was loads of signs there, but back then, it there was no. I was known as an awkward child.
Yeah, sure.
Mm,
Yeah. No answers, just awkward questions.
mm.
And so I'm going to suggest I mean, you've suggested rather that 3 years before your surgery, things started really getting quite tricksy. But was there a time even before that when you felt instinctively something wasn't right? And what was the symptom that perhaps maybe worried you the most?
Um, I think it's because I can't think there's anything in one particular thing that stood out, but because I'd always been, as I said before, awkward
Hmm.
in brackets. Um, I think what really started to frighten me was like I couldn't associate what the pain in my legs were, and my like my face used to go numb, and my lips used to go numb, and my fingers would have terrible tingling sensations. And at some stage, I thought I'm too young to have a stroke.
Hmm.
Um, and it was just like, as you said, there's such a multitude of symptoms. I feel sorry for GPs really, because they can't zoom in on any one particular symptom, can they?
Well, you're right, they can't. But actually, just through having this conversation, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert. I'm absolutely just somebody who lives with the condition. But all of the things that you've been talking about are purely neurological. I mean, and should have been picked up perhaps earlier.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not a doctor, but even I can hear that those symptoms are neurological, right? There's something going wrong somewhere in the brain area that's actually causing all of these weird sensations. It's a neurological failure of many parts, isn't it?
Well, I know when I wasn't very well as a teenager, an 18-year-old, and this was to do with kind of the female body, and I wasn't very well at all, and but my legs were sore and things like that. And my mum brought me to the GP a couple of times, and he ended up saying that I was just looking for attention.
Mm, mm.
So
Oh dear. Oh dear.
after that, I just closed in on myself. When I wasn't feeling very well, I wouldn't say anything.
Just keep yourself to yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And then in later life, one after I had the surgery and I still wasn't very well, and I paid privately for an MRI scan and to see a neurologist privately because I really wasn't feeling the best. And he actually sat and told me and my husband that I was psychosomatic. Now that really upset me.
You're imagining it all. It's all in the mind. Actually, it was all in the brain.
Mm.
Can I talk to you about your post-operative recovery? First of all, can I just before we go there, did you have any issues with mobility? You mentioned the sensations in your legs. Were your feet dragging? Did your legs get heavy? You said you were falling over, but how was your walking?
Well, pre-op, I ended up using 2 walking sticks because I had lost my balance.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, and sometimes I would drag my leg, and the other symptom that I still have, because it was explained to me that the decompression surgery doesn't cure the problem; it stops it from
getting worse.
Getting worse.
Yeah.
So even post-op, pre-op and post-op, I still have the same issues in the sense that I can pick up a very hot plate and I wouldn't feel burning. So I have to be very careful when I'm having a bath or a shower.
And mobility, are you still walking with 2 sticks?
No, God, no, grand. No, I don't have any walking aids, but I find walking up in inclines difficult. And coming downstairs, I've got to be careful. But no, as I said, I'm very lucky. When I used to go to the aunts initially, to the annual meetings and that, I always thanked my blessings because there was people younger than me being post-operative, confined to wheelchairs and crutches and things like that, So I have to admit, I keep saying it, I am one of the lucky ones, and I have learned to adapt my life. There are still times that I can go to pick up something and I can't grip it.
I think that's the key, isn't it? It's actually, I often say I never want to be defined by my disability, but you've got to be respectful of it. You've got to adapt, and you've got to move right above it. I think, certainly psychologically anyway. Otherwise, it can be quite a drag, on your mental health if you don't sort of have that sort of fighting spirit, and also realise that there are worse people off than you set off. I know that sometimes sounds very trivial and a bit trite, but it's true, isn't it? I mean, I certainly saw some really tragic cases when I was on the ward at Addenbrooke's, and I thought, well, do you know what? This is going to be life-changing, and this is going to be difficult, and I'm going to struggle to come to terms with it, because I was a fit person. I love badminton, I love walking, and anyone who knows me knows how energetic I kind of was. Still am mentally, but physically, nah. But you've
so
got,
how does it affect you? Your everyday life.
Similar symptoms, really. Constant pain. So, but I manage that, and I don't harp on about that because I think you can. And I know that people are going to shout at this podcast and say, "No, that's rubbish." But you can manage pain yourself without medication. You can. I'm not saying it's mind over matter, but you've just got to come to terms with it and not let it get the better of you, I think. So, I managed that okay. Mobility is pretty shocking now, I think. And just, all the sort of stuff that the lack of sensation down one side. I don't have any temperature on my right leg. Stomach pains, back is numb. Strange things, just balance is obviously rubbish. But yeah.
So do you get lightheaded? Do you get lightheaded often?
No, I get tired because walking is exhausting. The little walking that I can do is exhausting. So, and pain is tiring as well. I think, on a bad day, I've got a really interesting job, but it's not always easy. And I think sometimes the body can only cope with so much. If you're going through some physical stress or physical trauma, say you're in a lot of pain, or you were tempted to do some walking, because I don't think you should ever just give up. Um, and yet, you're having an anxious time at work, or you're under a bit of pressure or whatever. Um, the brain just goes, do you know what? I'm really struggling to get all the messages down to your feet, to your legs, and to wherever. Give me a break. Can you just go and chill out for a while? Of course, you can't. But sometimes I think, I mean, you've had those. You've had a very similar job, procurement manager.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when work is quite pressurized, there's something has to give, right?
Yeah, yeah. Work-life balance. I mean, I went for a lovely walk yesterday. I enjoy walking, but I don't walk too far. And we live in Uri now, in a place called Besbrook, and there's a lovely little
Lovely
place.
part of the world. Lovely.
Yeah, and it was a lovely day, so I thought I'll saunter up to the village and get some cakes. So I walked up to the village, walked around the lake, little pond kind of thing, and walked home. But last night in bed, my legs were killing me. Oh, and it just upset you, because I was up and down and kind of this restless leg syndrome, and that was from a walk of about a half an hour's walk.
Yeah. So there's no way I could even attempt that. But what I did buy last year, which was life changing for me, actually, and put a huge smile on my face, is I bought a electric trike.
All right.
And it's a really cool looking trike as well. It's not some one of those sort of pretend Harley Davidsons or anything like that, but it's black, it's nice, it's big, and it's sturdy. And it gets me out and about, and I absolutely love it. It's the woods, the ponds, the fields. I just take the electric trike and off I go. Um, Really, really, I mean, it's just a sense of freedom, isn't it? That most people who go for walks, of course, just take for granted. Why shouldn't they? It's instinctive. Walking is instinctive. And you only realize that when suddenly you can't. And you go, yeah, Let me take you back to post-operative care. How was it leaving hospital? How were you looked after the surgery?
Unfortunately for me, I was in hospital for 2 weeks, and that was fine. And then I came out on a Saturday, and on the Monday I had to be brought back in. And I had excruciating headaches. I was really, really ill, and it turned out that I developed medical meningitis, like post-operative meningitis.
Wow. Okay.
And I spent another 10 days in hospital, but that was worse than actually getting over the operation. It was horrendous. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't cope with light. Anyway, I came home after that, and it was about, I had a review maybe 6 weeks later, and then 3 months, and then 6 months, and 12 months. And that was it. Bang, shut. Nothing else after 12 months. Nobody was bothered.
Mm. Mm.
And that's when I started to develop what I thought developed, but they hadn't gone away really. It's kind of more, I thought, oh, this is not right, I just don't feel well. I went to see Graham Flint in Birmingham. I asked to be referred to him because I had realised I had done my research and found out about ants. The North Staffs, post-operative, pre-operative, while I was in hospital, you name it, couldn't thank them enough. I feel they saved my life twice, because I got breast cancer then in 2007. But
wow.
post-operative for the Arnold Chiari, once the 12 months was up, that was it. No, there was nothing. The only support I got was from them.
So, ANTS, the Anne Conroy Trust, which we're both members of, very proud to be members of the Anne Conroy Trust, a fantastic charity that actually looks after and funds research for Chiari Malformation and syringomyelia. You've been through a lot, but you still sound like a very positive person. And I want these podcasts to be quite positive because, I think if anybody listening to this thinks, oh my goodness me, I've got these symptoms, and then they go to their GP, they're referred to their neurologist, they have their MRI scans, and then they're told they've got Chiari malformation or they've got syringomyelia and they need surgery. what I don't want these podcasts to do is put fear of God into them and think, oh my goodness me, because my life is good, and I have a great job, and I'm still very driven and ambitious. Sorry, team, you know who you are. And I can tell that you're quite positive as well. So anybody listening to this who's just recently been diagnosed, or actually might still be diagnosed, what advice and guidance would you give to them, and what is life like for you?
I would say not to give into it.
Yeah,
Um, I'm a great believer in fate, and I accept the hand that's been dealt. And going around with your head in the sand, or like an ostrich with your head in your sand, feeling sorry for yourself. The only one who's affected really is yourself and your loved ones around you.
absolutely.
So if
Absolutely.
you need to, I felt, and I had the same, as long as of issues I could write a book. But even when I had the breast cancer, you've got to stay positive, and you've got to think, I'll get over this. I don't have a lot of tolerance for people who feel sorry for themselves. I'm sorry about that. I know we're all different,
I
but
think it's probably a side effect of what we've been through.
it
You
could
know,
be. Yeah.
I think so. I think when you go through a life-changing situation, I think for some people, I mean, like people say it changes your life, and you come out and you think, oh my goodness me, work-life balance, and yeah, maybe, but actually, perhaps, truth be told, someone's complaining about something that actually is quite small stuff, and
Mm,
you know what you're going through, you kind of think, hold on a second. you know, hold on. Let me tell you what pain is. Let me tell you what a life limiting conditions are really like.
mm.
Um,
I think there's always somebody worse off, as you said earlier on.
yeah,
And if once you're diagnosed, and now I know the superb help with pre-op preparation, there wasn't when in 1997. But there is a lot, and the Anne Conway Trust, or AMSA, as it know now, the nurses there, they're great now, and the magazine is great.
brilliant.
But I think if you can prepare your own mind and say, look, I've got this, I can't undo it. But what can I do to help? Just to help me to make my life better, and to make the people around me, my loved ones' lives better. And if the person who's suffering is a bit more positive, it helps all around.
Yeah,
It really
helps.
does.
Massively does. Yeah. It
Yeah.
certainly helps the person who's going through this, living with this condition,
Mm,
because as I said, don't be defined by it. Do not be defined by it.
mm.
It won't beat you if you're positive, and those around you will be encouraged to support you even more, I think.
Yeah. Well, there was, I learned a valuable lesson, and again, I'm not being kind of self-important or anything, but the day I sat with the surgeon up in the North Staffs Hospital, it was the day I was actually 40, the 10th of September. And he was explaining what he was going to have to do, crack open the back of my head and all this, that, and the other. So when he was finished, I said, what can I do to prepare myself and get ready for this physically and mentally? And he said, physically, he said, don't get pregnant. I said, oh, don't get pregnant. And I said, well, I can't because I'm unable to have children. And he looked down at the notes, and I've never heard it said before. And he says, oh, that's right, you're barren. And I said, well, that's a bit
Ouch.
difficult saying, right? And I said, just as a matter of interest, what would have happened had I ever become pregnant? And he told me, he said, your spine would have snapped under the pressure or the weight of the pregnancy. Now, I came out of there thinking God works in wondrous ways. And because I wasn't able to have children, I didn't end up paraplegic. Because he said if I had the weight of a pregnancy, would have snapped my brain, or would have snapped my
Wow.
spinal cord.
Wow. Look, we're out of time. I'm going to say something on that note. My mum was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in the 60s, and it was only uh, 2 weeks before she died that actually, in her late 70s, when she was, had dementia. And they did another brain scan. They realized they'd misdiagnosed her in the 60s. So she didn't have multiple sclerosis. She had syringomyelia. Um, and she gave birth to two, I'm going to say, healthy children, myself and my sister. So it is possible with syringomyelia. I take on board what you're saying about Chiari malformation. But again, it's important to emphasize we're not medical professionals, right? And the research around this is changing all the time. So if you heard anything today that leaves you a little bit worried, go and seek professional help. Pauline,
Definitely.
It's been amazing talking to you. You are an absolute, trooper, survivor, positive spirit. I'm going to ask, all is clear with the cancer? You good?
Oh God, yeah. I'm a cat with my life. There's life after. I can't speak for syringomyelia, and in one way, I'm very grateful for that. But I can speak for Chiari malformation, and I do understand and I do fully appreciate that the syringomyelia is a much more painful and severe condition than the Chiari malformation.
Well, I mean, I will say again with syringomyelia, you can live with it quite comfortably, be relatively asymptomatic. But actually, at the other end of the scale, it's a very different picture. However, look, let's be positive. I am going to get on my electric trike. I'm going to go around the pond, and you are probably going to go for a lovely walk this afternoon because the sun is shining. And on a British summer, we can't let that go to waste, can we? We can't let that go to waste. Pauline, it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you for giving up your time. And again, for helping to create this awareness around Chiari malformation or Chiari malformation and syringomyelia. It will.
Okay. Take care. God bless.
Cheers, Pauline. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wasn't Pauline lovely there? Absolutely fantastic. What a survivor. And again, not defined by her condition or her conditions, and not in any way bitter or resentful, just understanding that actually more awareness is needed around these conditions. So I'm going to leave you for this week. See you next week for more experiences centered around those living with syringomyelia and Chiari malformation. I hope you found this interesting, and if there was anything that you heard that maybe, set the alarm bells ringing or that you're concerned about, first of all, it's important to realise that a lot of the symptoms that we discussed could just be part and parcel of everyday life. Okay, we all occasionally suffer from pins and needles, etc., or our leg goes numb, etc. But if you are worried, if something resonated with you and you think, well, okay, I probably need to seek some medical advice, do so. Absolutely without delay. All right, I'll see you next week for more stories with those living with syringomyelia and Chiari malformation. Till then, take care.